Easy and quick, crisp pizza made from scratch, no kneading necessary. You won't want to order pizza once you start making your own. When you want to try baking something with yeast, pizza is one of the friendliest recipes you could try, and this particular recipe doesn't need much by way of technique because there's no kneading involved in this recipe. We will simply mix all the dough ingredients together, pat it onto the pan, rest it and then bake it. Your pizza will be ready in no time at all. The first and the most important thing here would be using good quality yeast and knowing how to use your yeast. If you have never used yeast, please do watch this video on different types of yeast and how to use your yeast. So before we start making the pizza, we need to make sure that our sauce is ready, the tomato sauce, and we have some mozzarella cheese here. I like to use Amul, and we have some fresh basil leaves here. You could also make the sauce the previous day and refrigerate it if it's more convenient to you, but please do not use sauce from a bottle as it would totally ruin the experience. Please do not do that. So before we make the dough ready, we need to have our pans ready, and I'm using these simple aluminum pans. These measure about 10 inches in diameter. You could find these in any departmental store nearby. And we'll first grease these pans with some extra virgin olive oil, about a teaspoon of oil per pan. Please do not be stingy here. We need this amount of oil here. We need the crust really crisp, and we also need it to come out of the pan easily. So grease it thoroughly and really well. You could either make 2 large pizzas or 3 smaller ones. So you could use any size pan which fits your oven. Only make sure that it is something flat like this so that you could slice the pizza easily and lift it out from the tin very easily. And once we have the pans ready, we can start making the dough. I have some instant yeast in this large bowl here. We are going to be mixing the dough in this bowl, and there's some all-purpose flour or maida and some salt and a tiny bit of sugar in this bowl. I have just mixed all of them together really well. And then we have some extra virgin olive oil. You could of course use normal regular cooking oil, but the extra virgin olive oil gives a really nice aroma to the pizza, so you might want to use extra virgin olive oil. Please do weigh and measure all the ingredients very carefully because the consistency of the dough is really important here. If you add too much of water, then your dough may become very sticky and very difficult to handle. And adding too much of yeast can make your pizza smell funny. If you would be using active dried yeast, you would need to proof it first. That is, you would need to add the warm water to this yeast and then let it sit for about 10 minutes till it's all frothy and bubbly, and then you add the rest of the ingredients. But since I'm going to be using instant yeast, I do not need to be doing that. I'll just dump everything here and start mixing the dough. So now we add some lukewarm water to this yeast here. The temperature of the water is really important. If the water is too hot, it might kill the yeast. And if you're using instant yeast, you're safer. You could err on the side of the water being less warm. Remember, if using active dried yeast, at this stage you would need to leave it for about 10 minutes for the yeast to get activated and then continue with the rest of the procedure. Now we are going to be adding the oil and then the rest of the ingredients. We'll just dump it in. Mix it first. This is going to be making a slightly soft and a fairly sticky dough. And you might at first think that the dough is not coming together, so you may need to add a little more water, but just mix it for a minute or so and then you will see that the dough will come together. You don't need to be adding a lot more water. You could sprinkle a little bit of water if you think it's necessary and if it's too dry. So now this is your dough, and we need to stir this energetically for about 20 strokes like this. You could get somebody to help you with this. This would be the toughest part of making the pizza. And you will see the dough becoming a little more sticky. Now you need to grease your hands lightly and then remove the dough from this bowl. You could also use a flexible plastic dough scraper to do this. Then we will also grease the counter lightly and we'll dump this dough here. And now we are going to be dividing this into 3 parts roughly. You could also weigh the dough to make sure you have the dough of the same quantity. And the best tool to cut the dough is a bench scraper, a metal one. And so now we have roughly 3 pieces. And now we have about 3 pieces here to make about 3 8-inch pizzas. Now we'll put this on the pan and then start spreading it around. And if you find it difficult to spread the dough, you could just leave it for about 5 minutes and then come back to the dough. It would have relaxed and then it would be easier to spread it. So after the dough has rested for about 5 minutes on the pan, it's much more easier to stretch and pull it, and use both your hands and then stretch it to make it about 8 to 9 inches in diameter. You can make it smaller if you want a thick and bready pizza, but I like my pizzas crisp and thin. Be sure to keep the thickness of the pizza uniform, otherwise the crust might get burnt at some places, especially the center. Please make sure it's not very thin. You can already see the bubbles here. The yeast is getting activated. And now we are going to be letting this rest for about 30 to 40 minutes till the dough is kind of puffy and you can see lots of bubbles all over the surface of the dough here. You may have to rest the dough for about 30 to 40 minutes, and the time may vary depending on the atmosphere and the temperature around. So if it's colder, it might take longer. If it's warmer, it might take shorter time. So at the end of around 40 minutes, I'm going to be preheating my oven to 250 degrees centigrade, which is the maximum temperature in my oven. We need the oven to be really hot. And in case you'd be using an oven toaster griller, you'd have to start preheating earlier. And now I have a rather funny way of baking my pizza. I like to bake the crust fully before I put the sauce and the toppings on the pizza. So about after 40 minutes, when the dough is all puffed up, we are going to be pricking the base. We do not want this to puff up in the oven and become really soft or spongy. We want it crisp. So we are going to be pricking this. And then bake it for about 10 to 12 minutes at 250 degrees centigrade. We need the edges to turn a light golden brown, and if you lift the pizza, the bottom should be a nice golden brown and it should be crisp. And if you want vegetables on your pizza, then after 40 minutes, you could just stick in some thickly sliced onions and tomatoes or anything else you want, and then put it into the oven to bake. The baking time again may vary depending on your oven and the thickness of the crust, so be really careful because you are baking at a very high temperature and the pizza may burn. And now after 40 minutes, I'm going to be baking the crust. We'll bake this for about 10 to 12 minutes. I'll put it for 10 minutes, and if needed, I'll add 2 minutes more. So after 12 minutes, I'm going to be taking out the crust out of the oven. So once you remove the crust from the oven, it's going to be looking like this. It has to be golden brown around the edges, and you should be able to lift the pizza easily and the pizza will be crisp. And before we put on the cheese and the tomato sauce, I just want to make sure that I'm able to lift the pizza easily, because once I put the cheese and the sauce, I might not be able to do a lot about this. So we'll just, and then you should be able to lift it like this. And if you lift the pizza, it should be crisp and a nice golden brown at the bottom. And so now we are going to be putting the sauce on the crust here. Now the basil and the cheese. We'll tear the basil. And now the cheese. I do not like the way the cheese turns very stretchy and chewy if I add it much ahead. And while you load the pizza with the cheese and the sauce, keep the oven on at 250 degrees centigrade. And now we are going to be baking the pizza for about 2 to 3 minutes till the cheese melts. And now after 3 minutes, we'll take the pizza out. The cheese has all melted now. And now we are going to be slicing the pizza immediately. You do not want to wait. You could also use a pair of scissors to cut the pizza. And now lift it up. Then put it on a serving plate and sprinkle on some oregano and some chili flakes if you wish to, and eat immediately without any delay. Please do bake the pizza and let me know how you liked it.